Could the Dark Knight Batman take down Diavolo and his gang Passione? This is a rather large and multifaceted question. The question I'm presenting here is something I think most JoJo fans and Batman fans would appreciate. Batman in multiple continuities of DC has fought large and dangerous organized crime gangs within Gotham and outside of it. The League of Assassins, the Court of Owls, the Siamese crime family, Penguin's gang, the Triads, the Russian Mafia, among many, many more. But never a group whose strongest members are all superpowered gangsters operating under a even greater and stronger boss, the time and fate manipulating stand user Diavolo. In my opinion, I would say Passione is as dangerous as the Court of Owls, if not even worse. They are a gang that controls the southern half of Italy with an iron grip. Nothing goes in or out without them knowing, and have complete control over their drug routes, which goes through them and then throughout all of Europe. Not to mention too, they pay off politicians and policemen. Passione is big time players here. So how could Batman take down Passione and Diavolo? Well, that comes down to Batman's intellect and fighting prowess. Part 5 Golden Wind is a unique JoJo part. In order to beat it, one both needs intellect and fighting power just to survive, and even greater to beat it. So this hypothetical battle will be a great showcase of Batman's skill set to the fullest. Does Batman have what it takes to do it? Would he even make it to Diavolo in the first place? Could Batman even win? And for the more curious JoJo fan and the knowledgeable Batman fan, could Batman gain a stand? Let's find out. And by the way, my name is Metas. Walk with me. So let's set up some things first. There are two ways to answer this question. Number one, and the thing I'll be talking about most here, is a half story, half power scaling in character look at the question, and second being a full-on power scaling discussion I'll be saving for the very end. The reason why I'm doing this is I want to entertain, as I think a story-based kind of discussion with this question leads down a lot of hypotheticals that I think a lot of people will love to be engaged with. And the fact that the power scaling section is really short. Newsflash, Batman with prep time is a dead meme. Stay tuned to the very end to find out why. So what kind of Batman will I be using for this hypothetical question, as I think that's fairly important and really justified with this question, as a specific choice will lead down a specific answer. And for the sake of entertainment for this video, I think I came up with a pretty good one. I think I'll just be using a generalized JoJo Batman. What I mean by that is a Batman who's existed within JoJo's for at least a while now, with his general stats and utility equipment. What that looks like is just Batman with his extremely high intellect as per usual, his extreme fighting prowess, and all the peak human and maybe even some superhuman feats Batman is known for. This Batman is young with at least several years of experience behind his belt, at most 10. So you're looking at a Batman who's probably in his late 20s, early 30s. And of course, he's rich. He's funding this all by himself with no help from a Robin or Alfred or anybody else. It's just him. I also would like to add, while we're just doing general power scaling, that I won't be too nerdy about it. I'll keep it very brief so everybody gets the gist of it. Now, when it comes to the story that will be taking place here, I think for the most part it will be very similar to just original Golden Wind, but just because Batman's here, some things might be out of place, but I think for the most part Batman will fight nearly everybody, so the story beats won't change that much. However, the interactions will. I'm also adding here win and loss conditions, just to make the topic work a bit more and just to make it even more entertaining for you guys. Number one, if Batman beats all of Passione, he wins. This is just a very basic one, but I think everybody understands it. Number two, if any Passione members have an extremely high likelihood of beating him, Batman will lose. For example, if Risotto or Ghiaccio just have every category of beating him, Batman just loses this section of the video entirely. If I cannot figure out a way logically for Batman to win the fight, he's more than likely dead. Number three, if Batman figures out Diavolo is Doppio, he kind of wins, because the whole thing about part 5 is Diavolo keeping his identity a secret. So if Batman were to figure it out and then rat it out to the authorities that are not corrupt, he does win, but we don't get the whole final battle between these two. So it's kind of a you win category, but not the true ending. And number four, if Batman or Diavolo end up getting the Requiem arrow, they win. This one should be pretty obvious for JoJo fans, but for the Batman fans that don't know, if one gets the Requiem arrow and then stabs their stand with it, they end up getting a massive stand energy increase that they outright become undefeatable. So with that all being said, let's start Batman versus Passione. Within this version of the JoJo universe lives a Bruce Wayne who met the same fate as so many different versions before him, losing his mother and father in Crime Alley. Seeking vengeance, after years of training, Bruce eventually becomes the Batman. At this point, Bruce has been Batman for several years and has fought gangsters and villains for a majority of that time. Batman has noted in recent months that drugs outside of Gotham are coming in. These drugs are a powerful salt-like opiate, allowing it to be injected. The drawback to the drug is the opiate formed from the salt only exists for a total of 2 weeks before reverting back into salt again. Somebody is transforming salt into a drug, and Batman is the only one with the resources to stop it. Batman now finds himself tailing a gangster group by the name of Passione in Italy in order to stop the drug trade coming into Gotham and around Europe. Batman must fight Passione alone. Who will win? So where does Batman begin his investigation here to take down Passione? Well, I think the obvious answer here is Pulpo. Not because this is where kind of the story really starts within original part 5, but just the fact that Pulpo is a high-level gangster within Passione who knows a lot of things. He's the only stand user in the entire franchise that has the ability to give other people stands, and more or less being a gatekeeper for upcoming newbies entering Passione. So in theory, and using context clues, he literally knows everybody in the gang, or at least everybody that is extremely powerful within the gang. Hell, I would even double down. From what can be understood here, Diavolo willingly gave Pulpo the stand arrow after his trip from Egypt after gaining his stand, King Crimson. So if anything, out of everybody in the entire gang, Diavolo trusts Pulpo the most. So that means he's extremely trusted. Maybe Batman doesn't know that coming into this, but he definitely will know after it. How Batman found Pulpo? Well, the EU has a public criminal database, so if I could figure that out, Batman definitely can, even if we're generalizing Batman here. Now, how would the interaction between these two characters go down? Well, I think for the most part, it is pretty self-obvious. Batman asks a couple questions, Pulpo doesn't answer, Batman gets aggressive, a stand fight now happens. So how does Batman proceed? Well, this is where it's gonna get a bit complex. While Batman beats Pulpo in literally every category possible, Pulpo still has Black Sabbath and does have the hacks advantage. With a stand that has the ability to travel in shadows, which is Batman's whole thing, Batman could be in some deep trouble. It gets even worse when Black Sabbath doesn't even need to physically harm you, as it attacks the soul. How it attacks is through the stand arrow. Once the stand arrow pierces you, there is an extremely high likely chance of you just dying. Why? Well, there is a virus that is coded on the stand arrow, which, well, if you survive it, you get a stand, and if you don't, well, I already told you, you die. The only way to survive the virus is if you have an insane fighting spirit. And since we're talking about Batman here, I think it's pretty obvious that Batman does have an extremely insane fighting spirit. This guy within the actual continuity of the mainline DC universe has been stated to have the same amount of fighting spirit or just fighting prowess as Wonder Woman. So I think he's fine in this category. And to answer the question for the intelligent Batman fan out there that knows that Batman can sense spirits, I do have one thing to say here. Stands aren't really spirits, kind of, sort of. They're more like mental, physical energy that requires you to have a stand to even see them. So while I would say Batman would sense the presence of Black Sabbath, for the most part, he'd probably get hit, as he couldn't be able to predict an invisible enemy that literally nothing but a stand user can physically see, and attacks at the soul level. So nothing really physical is going to really help Bruce here. So with all of that moved out of the way, I'm coming to the question everybody is probably wondering. So if he can gain a stand, what would his stand be, metas? Well, I think I've come up with a pretty cool one. Stand Master Bruce Wayne, stand name Good Grief. Why I chose Good Grief as the stand reference name here is in reference to Nirvana and the overall history of Foo Fighters involving David Grohl and Kurt Cobain. After the death of Kurt Cobain, David Grohl, the drummer of the group, eventually started his own band as a way to kind of cope with life at the time after losing Kurt, and would kind of go on a little bit of a vengeance streak against the the record company that owned the masters to the original Nirvana tracks. So I kind of see this like Batman versus Gotham City thing here coming through it. So I thought it'd be a pretty cool reference, on top of the fact, of course, Nirvana's soundtrack did inspire Robert Pattinson's Batman. So I thought it was overall just a pretty cool reference in general. Also, good grief, JoJo's catchphrase, just thought it would be cool. So getting into the meat and potatoes of the stand discussion, what is good grief's stand ability? Well, stand abilities, for the Batman fans that don't know, usually emphasize kind of the stand user's characteristic traits. In specific with Giorno here with part 5, Giorno wants to save young life and kind of foster a better future for kids and just people overall in general. So him having the ability to make life is a great way to show that. So in specific, talking about Bruce here, what characteristics would go through his stand ability? And in general, and almost in a very anticlimactic way, it would just be Batman. Again. But it's not like a Star Platinum kind of stand where it's just a punch ghost, as I feel like that would be extremely boring, especially in this part where it literally debuts wearable stands. So don't worry, it's not like Black Star Platinum with the ability to have like massive prep time or something. That would just be really dumb. What I'm trying to do with this stand in specific is try to emphasize the ideas of vengeance, fear, and hope. Good Grief is a wearable stand that mimics the style of Batman's cowl. When looking at Batman while Good Grief is active, Batman is perceived as like a bat-like demon with an intimidating aura. What I'm kind of envisioning is like absolute Batman that's currently coming up within DC Comics, a little bit of vampire Batman thrown in there, and specific art styles done by very abstract artists that have drawn Batman. Due to its intimidating aura, anybody who looks at him is basically petrified due to an intense fear. The only way to break out of it is through sheer willpower alone, or just people with strong-willed auras being able to counter it. While extremely simple, this is extremely good for Batman. Being able to guarantee strike fear into your opponents while fighting them or trying to just get more information out of them is a massive boon for Batman. He doesn't have to play the character here when his just overall look is doing it for him. So I think it's a really cool stand ability and just really works well for Batman. Also, quick note, just because it's a cape basically or a hoodie doesn't mean it can't be used in combat. Think of it like Arkham Batman's kind of cape where he's able to like break defenses. It also kind of works similar to that. Just thought I would point that out. But going back to Pulpo, yeah, he's cooked. Basically, Batman has every single stat advantage in favor for him. Not to mention his stand ability is probably working like crazy right now just because Pulpo didn't expect Batman to gain a stand. Not only that, but he looks like a demon. So yeah, Pulpo is just basically surrendering and giving up at this point. However, the running gag for this video kicks in. While Popo is highly trusted, he doesn't know everything, and especially he doesn't know the things Batman wants to know and just gives them basic information for the most part, being as truthful as he can in front of, well, this bat demon. I think the most Pulpo will know will be like something amongst the lines of the boss kills anybody who tries to figure him out, and the boss is trying to find his daughter, and he needs to guard her from other members of Passione. Depending on how you see it, either within the moment or maybe after a few days of investigating or just trying to think about it logically for a while, Batman probably comes to the realization that the only people that would know the boss has a daughter are people that either A, don't like the boss, or B, are trying to become the boss. So they have to have motive, and they probably have to be stand users. So logically, it has to come down to the Squadra for a few reasons. Number one, they are the assassination group, so they have to be stand users, and they do hold a lot of power within Passione. And since they get orders from the boss, they most likely know the boss. They're kind of the group to kind of get rid of problems that Diavolo doesn't want. Second, they recently lost 2 members pretty mysteriously, as they haven't been seen and other gang members would notice. So just due to those few clues, either Batman gathers within the moment asking questions from Pulpo, or just after the fact and eventually interrogating other gang members, he would most likely come to this conclusion. Now, the order Batman fights these guys is probably most likely random and cannot be predicted, except for Risotto, who is primarily just looking for the boss while the others are looking for Trish. So I would say more likely than not, Risotto will always be the last one Batman fights, but the others are completely random. But for simplicity's sake, we'll just go through the order that they appeared in. Batman versus Formaggio is a no-diff fight easily in Batman's favor. Why I say this is just because Batman is a master martial artist in a lot of categories, while Formaggio is just a simple street gangster. While he can do assassination techniques thanks to Little Feet in a one-on-one combat scenario, it really wouldn't affect Batman too much unless there were items involved. But other than that, Batman would dodge, roll, use his utility utility belt. There's almost actually a lot of argument here to be said that like he wouldn't need a stand at all if he were to fight Formaggio. I would say basically in every category, Batman has him beat, even when it comes down to stand ability. I think that fear factor is going to come in clutch. Moving on to Illuso, our next gang member. This one's a bit interesting. Man in the Mirror has the ability to send people away into a mirror dimension, basically sealing them away, or their stand if he chooses, or vice versa. It just depends on how Illuso's feeling. But Illuso has to physically overpower them to get them within that world, which definitely will be a problem here because, well, it's Batman. He is physically a peak human. I don't think Illuso's a peak human. Furthermore, Man in the Mirror needs mirrors to function or anything reflective. So depending on the environment, Illuso might actually be useless here. He could either be an extremely difficult fight or just basically a jobber. However, I don't think he'll play too much of a factor even if he did have mirrors. Why I say this is, like I said previously, Batman will physically overpower him because Batman is, well, Batman. I don't really have to explain that to you guys. The guy benches way too much and knows way too many fighting styles to be overpowered by Illuso. And second, Abacchio in his fight was able to realize he could still use his stand to fight him even if they were separated. So even if a vice versa scenario were to happen, Batman can still use his stand to fight him if he were separated. I think easily, thanks to Batman's intelligence, this is a high possibility. At best here, Illuso might give Batman a little trouble, but he will probably end up defeating him for the most part by either outsmarting him or just outpowering him. Now we move on to Prosciutto and Pesci. Now this one's actually a bit more interesting than the last two. The Grateful Dead and Beach Boy are a pretty lethal combo here, having the ability to age somebody extremely rapidly by touch or its gas, with Beach Boy's ability to fish out anything, even vital organs, is kind of, well, a serious issue here for Batman, as both of these stands have a ridiculously long range, making Batman's close combat kind of obsolete here for the most part. However, let's talk about Batman's stealth and utility equipment, as this is probably going to be the thing that saves his ass here. Batman, for the most part in all these fights, has an advantage over them as they are not in their element like they are in the original part. So that has something going for Batman. More likely than not, I see Batman playing a game of fear, or like the takedown like mini game within Arkham City where you're just trying to take out as many guys as fast as possible. So I think it'd be something similar to that. Just trying to psych out both of these stand users where they get out in the open and Batman's able to do a crazy amount of damage to them in a very, very quick session. Because if Prosciutto is caught off guard, he really can't age Batman, and Pesci as well. Until a rage amp or a resolve amp isn't too much of a threat, he'll be more of an annoyance than anything. And since Batman's not killing any of these guys, I don't think Pesci will ever get that resolve amp. So for the most part, Pesci is the weak link, and Batman was most likely going to target him first than anything. And then bide his time until Prosciutto messes up, or Batman's stand, good grief, affects him slowly over time, as Batman's whole thing is fear. And I do think Prosciutto possibly can be affected by fear. I think he's probably like the second or third most like strong-willed member out of the Squadra, so I don't think it would immediately affect him, but over a long period of time and taking out Pesci, I think Batman can wear Prosciutto down. Now, Prosciutto is deadly here and can make Batman age, but even in older ages, Batman is still physically fit enough to fight, depending on the interpretation you're using here. And since we're generalizing, I still think even an older Batman is still physically fit enough to at least do some level of combat. However, to kind of hop off the Batman ride, I will say Prosciutto and Pesci so far out of everybody in this video are the first ones to pose a highly challenging fight for Batman. This will be a long one and definitely not an easy one, because if Pesci ends up growing a pair and then comboing with Prosciutto, Batman might not be able to come out of this alive. This is the first kind of one where you have to raise your eyebrow a bit, because once that fish hook enters your body and it's a vital organ that he's trying to fish out of you, Batman really can't do anything and he could possibly die here. And with all that aging gas around him, yeah, this is definitely not going to be an easy one. This is not going to be like an easy clear like the last two. This is a deadly combo. But I do think Batman does have a few answers to that within his utility belt and just using his stealth and wearing them down over time. Now up next is Malone, and I'm just going to flat out state it. Since Batman is hunting these guys down, Malone probably doesn't have prep time for Babyface to work, and he ends up losing because Babyface like takes a while to eventually age up and grow up and eventually actually becomes like a useful stand. So yeah, Batman wins, and even if Babyface were to show up, it still acts like a child, and since Batman's literally just fear itself and kids are extremely fearful, yeah, this is like a no difficulty fight. I actually personally don't think any fighting would happen here. Like, Malone is not a very good stand user in like hindsight, unless he has time to make Babyface and he's fighting an opponent that really can't scare the child. Like, I'm just saying, like, it's really easy here. Anyway, moving on, let's talk about Gyat Chow and White Album. On the surface, this fight does seem extremely difficult for Batman. Gyat Chow's White Album has the ability to freeze anything to almost absolute zero, so trying to get close to him is kind of a near death sentence. However, this is where Batman is most likely going to excel. Gyat Chow has a bit of a rage problem, I'll say that. So more likely than not, after pushing aside stats or what they've done in the past, this fight boils down to just mental warfare, because Batman, with all of his skill and technique, knows for a fact after probably encountering Gyat Chow once, seeing that he has ice-based abilities in close proximity, is not going to try that again, so he has to use other means. And since he is notoriously known for exploiting his enemy's psychological weaknesses, he's going to do it here. So a fight that would be normally extremely difficult in regular power scaling, if we're now involving character and story plot here, Batman would easily just kind of outsmart Gyat Chow into just kind of either doing something stupid or just exploiting his emotions so he eventually does something stupid with it. I most likely see Batman using like environmental tactics or explosive batarangs to damage White Album's armor, because once that's broken, I think Batman can just easily take down Gyat Chow, as he really doesn't have anything but his ice powers. He's not known for anything else. But to have favor with White Album, Gyat Chow only really needs to damage like Batman's legs or attack his chest or his head to really finish off the fight extremely quickly. So it's not one-sided at all. It's difficult for both opponents here to achieve victory. But for the most part here, I do think Batman can win, so we can move on. So, going back to the story here, after defeating a majority of Passione, what has Batman discovered? Well, for the most part within the original story, the Squadra for the most part knew where Trish was multiple times throughout the story. So it is pretty likely to say that Batman would eventually end up saving Trish or meet up with Trish. So in this scenario, we could activate the third win condition here and just say that Batman kind of wins because he uses Trish as a radar, ends up using his detective skills to figure out who Diavolo is, report him to the police, and the video could be over here. However, that's boring and we want to see Diavolo and Batman fight. So to continue on forward, we'll just say that Trish's sole radar abilities just don't end up working out here for whatever reason, maybe because she doesn't have a stand yet or something, and Batman still has to go on the hunt, which leads Batman down a pathway which he fights the final Squadra member, Risotto Nero, as he is primarily looking for the boss and not Trish. And I won't lie, the entire reason why I made this video was to see these two interact and fight. Personally speaking, when it comes to their backstory, they are very similar. Both of them come from a traumatic experience that should, in theory, make both of them evil. However, Batman picks up the side of justice in order to save people, while Risotto just ends up going down a life of crime. So in a way, two sides of the same coin. To even add more story detail, unlike the other previous Squadron members were just straight up fights and just interrogating them for information, this one almost comes down to kind of questioning, I feel like, between the two characters. What I mean by that is both of them just asking why they're doing this in the first place. Why is Batman trying to defeat the Squadra, and why is Risotto doing the things he's doing when he can probably live a better life with his stand ability? And it eventually just all boils down to morals. Justice versus revenge. It's honestly, in my opinion, a really, really cool fight and just an overall cool concept. So much so, and just thinking about how the characters could interact, there is a cool scene in my mind where Risotto looks at Batman and says, if you were to have come to me first and explained what you were doing, I would have let you do this solo crusade. But you've hurt my friends, and basically my only family members now in his life. So it's not out of I hate you, Batman, it's out of the disrespect that comes with it. Like, I'm trying to find like a very Godfather way to answer it. It's kind of like because of that disrespect, I have to fight you. It's kind of like that. And holy shit, dude, would this fight be fucking cool. Risotto is a man steadfast in his beliefs, and he fought Diavolo knowing that he was either going to die or come out of that fight alive. So this man has no fear. This is just straight up hands versus hands. Batman with no armor. He's not using any of his utility equipment because they're all made out of metal. It is literally just Batman. It is Bruce Wayne and good grief. And his technique versus Risotto and his stand Metallica. So getting into the nitty gritty of it, Metallica has the ability to control metal within a very close proximity to Risotto. That includes the iron within your blood and the iron or metals within the nearby environment. On top of that, Risotto can reflect light, so he can become invisible. However, in this fight, that ability would be useless, as Batman most likely can find his heat signature through his cowl or binoculars, so it's not very important within this fight. So with that out of the way, who would end up winning? So this fight comes down to a few things: stamina, durability, and some really crazy resilience and fighting technique. You can say here, under the wins and loss conditions of this video, that number 2 would apply here. This would be an extremely difficult fight for Batman. None of his stand abilities would work here, and he has to get up and close to fight this guy to begin with. So Batman could potentially die here. Out of everybody in this entire video, Risotto is potentially the first or second person to give Batman a run for his money. When you have knives and scissors coming out of your body, then into your body multiple times, and dodging and weaving all of that while fighting a guy who is extremely durable, who only died to automatic gunfire, basically point blank, yeah, this is going to be extremely tough. With a limited arsenal as well, you can argue that Batman should lose here. However, for the sake of the video and me wanting to continue on forward, I'm going to say that due to Batman's intelligence and just sheer fighting prowess, that he does end up beating Risotto. However, I would like to specify it was a long and drawn out fight with a lot of blood and a lot of damage to both fighters. Switching back to the storyline here, after this long and bloody fight, Risotto eventually reveals to Batman that he was looking for Doppio, who is directly connected to the boss. So Batman knows where he's going now. However, during this, Batman has taken out multiple gang members, a lot of high-ranking gang members, and is most likely known to everybody. And what I mean by everybody is Diavolo knows, and now Polnareff knows. I'll come back to Polnareff soon. Let's talk about Diavolo here. Since Diavolo does not want his identity to come out, more likely than not, he will require the special unit of Passione to come and fight Batman for him before he reaches him. So it's kind of like an inverse of scenarios that happened with the original Golden Wind, where the crew had to fight Diavolo first, then the special unit, then Diavolo again. So how does that play out? Well, funny enough, for the most part, these guys actually do worse than the Squadra by a very large margin. Going in order when they first appeared, talking about Squalo and Tiziano first, only one of these guys is a threat while the other one is completely useless here. The stands Clash and Talking Heads are weird. While Clash is actually probably a threat here for the most part, as it's able to teleport to any body of liquid and then kind of resize itself to the liquid that it's in, it can be deadly, it can't be deadly at some points. It really just depends on the scenario. And Talking Heads just attaches to your tongue and makes you lie. But I don't know who Batman is talking to other than maybe Polnareff, but I highly doubt it, and I'll explain it later. But overall, these two guys are just useless. Batman within the story really isn't lying to anybody within these fights, nor is he really talking to anybody, and Squalo is scenario dependent, and I don't even know why Batman would be around a large body of water unless some shenanigans were afoot, but even then Batman would easily be able to figure it out and just get away from water, making Squalo useless. Anyway, moving on. Let's talk about Carne. Carne was this savage monster within the original part of Golden Wind, and I'm lying out of my ass. We have nothing about this character. He was one shot by Mista. Batman wouldn't even kill him in the first place to activate Notorious B.I.G. in its current form. I literally cannot talk about this character whatsoever. We just have to move on. So easy Batman win, I guess. Now finally, we actually end up getting into a pretty interesting matchup within the special unit, but technically speaking, these two are not on the special unit. These guys are last resorts, but just for funnies, we'll just put them in the special unit for right now. Chocolata and Secco. Their stand abilities are Green Day and Oasis. Oasis has the ability to swim through material matter. That's all it really does. can't go too crazy with that one, but it does have its uses, and potentially makes him slightly stronger than an average person, but that one's a bit fishy. I don't know if that's just, you know, JoJo's stand shenanigans or just Sekko being really powerful. On the other hand, Chocolata's stand, Green Day, has the ability to infect mold in the nearby air. However, it only activates when you are at a lower altitude than Chocolata. If you are, you start to mold away and start crumbling if you don't try to reach a higher altitude. And don't even try to attempt to go down because you will just die. So these two are extremely powerful stands. So how will Batman deal against them? Well, I'm kind of stumped here actually. Due to the circumstances of how the part originally went and just due to how Batman's doing it now, I don't know what will happen. Cause like, will Chocolata actually get a helicopter again and like do what he originally did? Or is he just gonna be on the floor the entire time with Sekko? And will Batman be on top of buildings? Cause that's what Batman usually does. Like, how is it necessarily working out here? I will say, I think in any scenario, Batman for the most part will play the psychological game and use good grief to psych out both of them and then defeat them through fear. So just another like Arkham takedown mini game again. So I think that's what would happen for the most part. These two, other than stand ability wise, aren't really a threat. These guys are just regular Gotham weirdos to Batman. So unless there's some weird shenanigans at play here, I think Batman wins this pretty easily to like maybe struggling at least a little bit with Chocolata. Sekko is just an easy counter. Batman's just going to be waiting until he messes up and then he's just going to beat his ass. So yeah, Sekko's really not a difficult guy to beat here. So yeah, when it comes to the special unit, Batman's fine. He can defeat all of them. I don't think he's really going to honestly struggle here at all unless there's some weird shenanigans at play here within the story. So with the special unit out of the way, let's talk about Polnareff next. How will he be involved within this story? Well, after the defeat of La Squadra, Polnareff definitely knows about Batman's existence within Italy. By this point, through rumors and hearsay. So could he get in contact with Batman? Realistically, no. How Polnareff found the group originally was by, well, actually I don't know. I can't tell if it's either hacking or they somehow tripped something and then he was able to, I don't know, Skype them or something to get in contact with Bruno's group. So I don't know how he would do it. That's the thing. I don't think he'd be able to hack into Batman's systems because those things have firewalls like crazy. So either he never ends up doing it or he has to manually find Batman, which is technically possible as he was able to find Diavolo originally, so I think it wouldn't be too hard to trace down the trail of Batman when he's already following Diavolo. So there could be a meetup eventually, but it's not going to be in the conventional way that we saw in the anime and manga originally. It definitely would feel pretty abrupt within a storyline because Polnareff would just show up randomly and be like, use this, you will get stronger. However, I would say this, if it's all time-based, I think from the ending of Risotto's fight to the encounter between Batman and Diavolo, Polnareff potentially can show up. And then if any point after that, the chances of it get higher and higher. It almost gets critical if you think Trish is still hanging around Batman. If she does her own independent investigating, technically there could be like a chance where Polnareff and Trish meet up to eventually meet up with Batman. So that's also a possibility that could happen. So the win condition of number 4 that I said at the beginning of the video is likely here. And if for whatever reason they show up during the fight, that also means Diavolo can potentially win here. But since I'm talking so much about it, let's talk about Batman versus Diavolo. So storyline looking at it, Batman has finally found Doppio thanks to Risotto, and a confrontation takes place between the two where Doppio reveals that he is Diavolo, or Diavolo reveals that he's Doppio. Vice versa, it doesn't matter. Good Grief versus King Crimson and Epitaph. Diavolo versus Batman. How is it going down? Well, in my opinion, I think this is very, very, very character dependent. That's due to the fact that Diavolo does have a massive advantage here when it comes to hacks. Not only can he skip time 10 seconds into the future, with events during that time skip actually happening, but he also can see into the future for about 10 seconds. However, it is shown that Diavolo is a bit weird with it and can kind of get cocky depending on the interpretation you're using here. If you're using the first time he showed up with it against Bruno, he's a bit smuggish versus the last few times where he was using it and he was immediately to the point and just straight killing people. So what would he do here? Well, looking at his character, I think it would be kind of a mix of both. He definitely would be playing around with Batman a lot here, psychologically freaking him out, how he's teleporting everywhere, how every time Batman tries to throw a punch, it's almost like he misses entirely, or he just shows up in a completely different spot than he originally was. It would be extremely confusing even for the Dark Knight. Even with good grief playing a psychological factor here, Diavolo has Epitaph to show him the future, so I don't think he honestly would be scared here. I think he'd have the willpower to overcome that fear, as shown with Gold Experience Requiem before he got that power up. So that leaves two options for Batman here in this scenario. Number one, run away and come back with a better plan, or number two, fight there and beat Diavolo. Going with the second path here first and really wanking Batman. If we honestly believe that Batman is a super genius who can fight in any scenario and come up with a plan on the fly, or at least can do some deductive reasoning on the fly to come up with something really fast, Batman could use everything in his arsenal to overwhelm Diavolo, as he can only see 10 seconds into the future within a specific moment, and use that to overwhelm him and time everything correctly, so he can't use Epitaph or time skip. However, while I do think Batman is a master fighter and a brilliant man, this is just too unrealistic for this scenario. Trying to figure out how Epitaph and time skip work while on top of trying to make up a plan so you can beat him just seems just too much even for the Dark Knight. It is much more in Batman's character, even generalized, that he would run away to come up with a better plan. He does this a lot of the time. This is in character for him in general, which leads to the question or the scenario of, would Trish or Polnareff get involved in either of these answers to the Diavolo versus Batman question? In my opinion, it just depends. If it happens afterwards, then Batman eventually gets a Requiem stand and then he just defeats Diavolo, just plain and simple. Or if it happens during their fight, it gets a lot more complex because now there's potentially 3 stand users, or at best 2. And there's so many details that it's very hard to predict with a very power scaling / story based discussion like we're having. So like I said, it just depends when Polnareff and Trish get involved. But if we're strictly looking at it with Batman trying to prep for round 2, I do think Batman could overcome Diavolo. Using some elaborate plan with a lot of moving parts and pieces and just overwhelming force, Batman could totally confuse Diavolo just like he did to himself, and could potentially take down Diavolo this way. And if somehow that incorporated fear using good grief, I think it even furthers a case for Batman here. So in general and overall, just depends on what you give Batman here to win. I would overall say within this story scenario, there is a lot of leeway for Batman to squeeze out a win over Diavolo. So to answer the question, could Batman defeat Passione and Diavolo? I think it is a plausible yes. Now, if you want to argue for a specific answer, then you have to go a little bit into the story details here, but overall, I think it is a yes. Now, like I promised at the beginning of the video, and if you skip forward here, hello, how you doing? My name is Metas. We will be using specific Batmans to answer the question, could Batman defeat Passione? And the one I'll be talking about primarily the most here is main comic Batman. Now, I'm going to guess some of you are probably going to say, well, it's still Batman, right? He needs prep time, like he's going to get washed here. Hold your horses, let me explain something. Mainline continuity Batman from DC Comics is not the same Batman from like 20 years ago. The whole Batman needs prep time to beat anybody is kind of like an old joke at this point because, well, to put it bluntly, this Batman is a canonical composite version of Batman. That basically means is all of his greatest records, his greatest feats are all wrapped into one. His intelligence is on par with Brainiac, who has a 8th to 12th dimensional level intellect, which means it's so high humanity itself cannot comprehend what Brainiac is thinking, and Batman is able to do that. He's able to comprehend on the same level as Brainiac. I know it's stupid, run with it. He's also been able to go toe to toe against Wonder Woman, who Wonder Woman has to go toe to toe against literal concepts of fighting itself. So Batman himself is on the same conceptual level as fighting, like the concept of fighting. It's stupid. Not to mention he's also dodged Darkseid's Omega beams. He's nuts, dude. Those are the same beams that are able to outspeed Superman. Like, it is so dumb. Current Batman doesn't need prep time. He's just ridiculously overpowered. Batman through sheer intelligence and combat skill alone destroys this part. And once we start taking into account stealth and gadgets he uses over these past few decades all into one arsenal, you can't beat him. And if you start giving him like his Justice League Buster suits, it's just like, what do you want to, what do you want Part 5 to do, dude? It's like, they can't do anything. So yeah, mainline comic Batman's just too overpowered, clears the entire part easily. Now, if we're talking about special variations of Batman with a power-up, for the most part, those versions of Batman probably can beat this part as well. So we're looking at like Yellow Lantern Batman, Green Lantern Batman, Vampire Batman, any version from him from the Dark Multiverse can probably end up soloing this part as well, as they're all physically amped to such a degree that they can more likely than not tank a lot of these stand abilities head on. And now if we're just doing variants of Batman with no power-ups, it just depends on that Batman. Just to go by really fast because this video is already long to begin with, if we're using Dark Knight Batman from the movies, for the most part here, while he's intelligent and has a lot of combat skill, he just doesn't have the physical stats of other Batman to really kind of help him out through this part, so he probably dies for the most part here. If we're doing Arkham game Batman though, this is where it kind of gets weird. Apparently his fighting skill is so insane, he's basically just a mini Spider-Man. He has like a mini like Batman sense, so it's like really weird with him. He'd be able to probably counter like Diavolo's like time skip, if anything, or literally anybody's like sneak attack, so he potentially can do it. He also does have some superhuman feats in there as well, just to make the argument more convincing. Now, moving on to DCEU Batman, this is where it gets really weird depending on the scaling. Either A, he's just like Dark Knight Batman with nothing really impressive, so he gets washed, or B, he's comparable to his version of Superman and Batman, which is really weird saying, but it just depends if you're using behind the scenes footage. So he could potentially beat this part as well through just sheer physical stats alone. Moving on to one of my personal favorite Batmans, being the Batman from the animated universe. This variant of the character probably can do it. He has some impressive feats relying on the Justice League as he kind of scales off of them, but he's also so smart, so this would be kind of the reverse of the Arkham variant of him, where he'd be able to figure out that Diavolo is like controlling like the space-time continuum and changing fate, and he'd instantly realize that and probably would be able to counter it while fighting. Sorry if I missed any of your favorite variants of Batman. That was going to be a long list if I kept on continuing. So I will just say this: if the Batman has shown like crazy intelligence feats and is on par with the Trinity in some aspects and regards, he probably can beat Part 5. And if anybody's wondering about the TLDR, yes, Batman can defeat Diavolo and Passione. It just depends on the variant you're using. Well, with that being said, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, stay hydrated, and I would love to make more of this goofy content to flex my power scaling knowledge and just my overall creativity while editing and just making these kind of concepts. If you guys really do enjoy these type of videos, tell me in the comment section below. It tells me a lot, and this video ends up doing well. Who knows? I might make I don't know, another Batman video or something. I really can't think of it right now. I've used too many of my good brain cells, but regardless, love ya, deuces.